everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com. Now let me just fill you in on how my morning's been so far. Got a message from Adam Machidi. Yo Jackster, that's what he calls me. Can you fill in for Graded today? And I was like, certainly can, Adam. And then I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to treat myself to a lovely breakfast because I'm shooting a video today that I didn't think I would be, so I thought I needed a bit of a pick-me-up. Lovely bacon and sausage sandwich, absolutely excellent. Then followed that up with a slice of caramel shortbread, also really good. A little bit heavy on the stomach though. And then finally, for some reason, for whatever reason, packet of Flamin' Hot Monster Munch as well. Possibly the worst and most childish breakfast I've had in several years, and I feel atrocious. You can't tell I'm putting on a bit of an act, but my stomach is in turmoil right now. But there are more pressing issues to address. Those issues revolve around brand supremacy, and there's only one place to go on a Tuesday to talk about that, and that is to last night's Monday Night Raw. But how good was last night's Raw? There's only one way to find out, and that is by assigning each individual segment a lovely individual grade. This is Monday Night Raw Graded. We start the show with the reigning Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch, who marches to the ring, and she's got a message for Bayley and Shayna Baszler, her two opponents at Survivor Series. Becky says she doesn't care about hashtag brand supremacy, she just cares about kicking ass. And she says that if you want to have a fight, we don't need to wait for Sunday, we can do it right here, right now. What better place, she says, for an Irish person to have a fight than in Boston, Massachusetts, baby. Ireland, maybe? Becky is interrupted by Peyton Royce and Billie Kay, the IIconics, and they come out and do their IIconics thing. Very entertaining, very funny, of course, but you know they're going to get absolutely mashed in just a few moments' time. Becky even says, I know that I'm meant to be having a tag team match with Charlotte Flair because I'm tethered to her for whatever reason. That's not me offering witty commentary. That's literally how Becky addressed the situation. I'm just tied to Charlotte for whatever. I don't know why. But Becky then says, I'd rather just beat both of you all by myself. Then Charlotte arrives and says, you know what, Becky, I don't want to tag with you either, but I guess we're going to have to because the forces want us to. What? Charlotte also reveals that she'll be captaining the Raw Women's team at Survivor Series, and then they set up for the tag match, and then Samoa Joe's music hits and he arrives. And that sounds like a non sequitur, I've just thrown it into the script, but not at all. That's quite literally what happened. Everyone just looked really confused. This opening segment gets a B-. It's a fine opening segment. You know, Becky's a really good promo. The IIconics are often a really good promo. Charlotte's also loud. But it also felt like a bit of a weird opening segment, which took away from the grade a little bit for me. It felt like they were trying to cram in too much information in a short amount of time. Like, oh, by the way, Charlotte's the Raw team captain, and Becky's annoyed at Bayley and Shayna, and also here's Samoa Joe. He's on commentary this week, Deal Madden's still off, and it all happened one after the other really quickly in quick succession, and they had a match tacked on top of it, and to me it just felt like a little bit too much, so it gets a B-. But the biggest drawback for me was Becky and Charlotte lampshading WWE's own unimaginative booking. Why did they write that in? Why couldn't they just write, here's a thought, instead of having Becky and Charlotte constantly in each other's storylines, why don't you just write fresh storylines for both of them, you know? Just because you've referenced it doesn't make it okay. Right, on to the opening match, Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair versus the IIconics. It's immediately apparent that Samoa Joe is a fantastic commentator. He's naturally charismatic and very funny and quite a charming guy without losing any of his heelish menace, so that was really cool to see. He's allowing a bit more of his up, down, down personality to shine through. If you haven't seen him on that channel, check it out because he is incredibly entertaining. Anyway, the match itself isn't great. It's a little bit sloppy and a little bit rushed. It only gets a minute or two to really develop. The heels attack the babyfaces at the bell, but then the babyfaces fight back, and eventually Charlotte gets the figure eight out of pretty much nowhere. Becky cuts off the interference, and they pick up the clean submission victory. But then, as Becky and Charlotte are making their way up the ramp in victory, the IIconics are attacked in the ring by Shayna Baszler and her horsewomen buddies. They beat down the IIconics for a bit, but Becky and Charlotte run back to help them, even though they've just beat them and they don't like them very much, because I guess they just hate NXT that little bit much more because it's November. But the horsewomen, the MMA horsewomen, not the wrestling horse, the NXT horsewomen, they get the up at the current NXT horsewomen, not the NXT horsewomen of the past. Shayna and Jessamine and Marina get the upper hand and they leave through the crowd, but then Becky and Charlotte are firing back to their feet. They want some more action. They get in the crowd and security blocks them off. And then Becky knocks out one of the security guys, and that's the end of the segment. This gets a B- too. A lot of positives and negatives to unpick in this segment. First of all, I like the whole chaotic feel and mixed allegiances and everything. I know that it's often really frustrating when storylines get shoved aside just because it's November, it's time for Survivor Series. But at the same time, I think here it does make a little shred of sense actually, because why would they care more about the IIconics when NXT are the bigger threat? Surely they'd run in and save the IIconics just to get their hands on Shayna and her pals. I was also really relieved to see that Shayna Baszler was accompanied by Jessamine and Marina, her actual long-term allies, because, you know, a little bit last week we saw her accompanied by the very women she's feuding with in NXT, and that kind of takes you out of the moment a bit. So I was relieved that everyone was in their right place for this segment. On the negative side, the match was short and pretty ugly, and also poor IIconics. You know, they were just being talked up by Samoa Joe on commentary as tag team specialists, and then they lost in a minute or two. And poor security guy who got KO'd by Becky Lynch, and everyone acted like Becky was a hero for it. At least when Austin would do something like this, yes, everyone would cheer, but, you know, they play it off as like, oh, he's out of control, he's a wild man. Whereas in Becky's case, everyone's like, she's so brave and strong. She's just punched a guy trying to do his job. And then King on commentary is like, well, he did have a face only a fist could love, just calling him ugly as well. Poor guy. Oh, poor, he's got to go home to his kids after that. Next up, we get AJ Styles, Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows. They are here to cut a vicious promo on the baby faces of WWE. Well, it's not quite that intense. AJ Styles takes the mic and says, you know what? I'd love to give Humberto Carrillo a title shot tonight, but he disrespected me last week, so I'm going to have Karl Anderson beat him up instead. It's like in the second verse of Tupac's Hit 'Em Up, when he lets his little homies run on Bad Boy and Biggie Smalls instead of himself, because he can't really be bothered. Humberto gets the upper hand early on, but then AJ and Gallows pull Karl Anderson out of the ring to help him recover. So who should come out on Humberto's side of things but the bloody Street Profits? They bring the swag like nobody can. That's how their theme goes. Yeah, they've got the swag like they bring the swag like nobody can. Gallows tries to get involved again a little bit later on. AJ distracts the ref, so Gallows yanks Humberto's head into the top rope. He snaps backwards into an inside cradle from Karl Anderson, but then the Street Profits get involved and reverse the cradle, putting Humberto on top, and he picks up the pinfall victory. This gets a B. I didn't mind it. It was light-hearted fun. It wasn't the most serious thing on the show or the most important thing on the show, but it did its job, and I want friends like the Street Profits. Next up, oh no. It's Lana and Bobby Lashley. Well, really, it's Lashley's match with No Way Jose, but Lana cuts a promo beforehand and says this is the best day of her life. Is the angle ending finally? No. She means she's filed for divorce. Now, one thing I've noticed about Lana when she's delivering these promos is that she does make a lot of little mistakes and then kind of rushes and improvises to try and cover up for it, something that I know really well. But at the same time, I don't quite understand whether that's just her not being quite on her game, or is it a sign of her not being happy with this storyline and she can't really commit fully to it and fully concentrate on what she's doing. Maybe she's even feeling the pressure a little bit because she knows everyone hates the storyline. Various little things could be going on. At the end of the day, she could just be doing what she's told and picking up a paycheck. I don't know her thoughts and her desires. I'm just trying to spread a little bit of theory and a little bit of speculation. But yeah, she says that when Rusev landed back in the States from the WWE's recent European tour, he was offered and handed a restraining order, which means he cannot come within 90 miles of her. 90 miles, that seems pretty extreme, but it's a deliberate mistake for laughs, because then Lashley whispers in her ear and she corrects herself. She goes, I love it when you correct me. I meant 90 days, 90 feet. She made a real mistake after the scripted one. Oh, it's like when Hogan was like, I'm here in the Silver Dome, and then he made an actual mistake and actually got the name of the venue wrong anyway. Just makes things a little bit more confusing, really. And then No Way Jose picks up the shocking victory over Bobby Lashley. No, Lashley just absolutely squashed him. This gets a D. I just want this storyline to end. Please, please make it end soon. Next up, Seth Rollins' Team Raw Survivor Series spot is up for grabs in a match against Andrade Almas. But without Seth Rollins on the team, how are Raw going to be able to burn it down? Now, of course, as much as they've absolutely torpedoed Seth Rollins' character in the past few months, the saving grace for him still in 2019 is that he is still an absolutely excellent wrestler, and so is Andrade, so this match was pretty strong. Or at least it was turning into a strong match until Seth Rollins went up for a frog splash, and then all three members of the Lucha House Party ran in their SmackDown merch and pushed him off the top rope and beat him down. And it was another Seth Rollins match ending in a DQ. Rollins and Andrade team up and fight off the Lucha House Party, including my boy Lince Dorado. Fair play to them for dealing with a customer as glorious and tricky to deal with as Lince Dorado. And yeah, that was pretty much the end of the segment, with Rollins and Andrade kind of implying we'll finish this off some other time. This gets a B-. As I say, it was developing into a good match, but then it turned into a very frustrating segment once again, involving Seth Rollins and an unclean finish to the match. In fact, it felt like the Lucha House Party weren't even there really to hype Survivor Series. It's just like WWE used that as an excuse so that there wasn't a decisive finish to this match. I mean, do you really think we're going to see Lindsay, Grand Metalik or Kalisto on the card for Survivor Series? Maybe on the pre-show, but certainly not on the main card. I'll be very surprised if that's the case. Next up, Buddy Murphy's on his way to the ring. He strides past Aleister Black's door, knocks on it and offers like a mock challenge and then continues on his merry way towards the ring. And then Aleister Black answers the door and he's like, oh, who was that? Murphy's scheduled opponent is Akira Tozawa, 2x205 Live guys. They've obviously got incredible quickness and chemistry in the ring together. The match only lasts about 5 minutes, but it's a good match with Buddy Murphy picking up the win after hitting Murphy's Law. Despite being a short match, I'm going to give this a B+ grade. Tozawa looked excellent here, and so did Buddy Murphy as well, as always really. But it did feel like a 205 Live rehash, and I really want to see Buddy put against some different opponents going forwards on the Raw brand, and I might be getting that wish granted pretty soon actually, because as he made his way backstage after the match, he was met of course by Aleister Black. So we'll see where this goes in the future. Next up, Erick Rowan's out with his weird cage with whatever's inside of it, and he's taking on Alex Malcom, a lovely enhancement talent with lovely colourful hair. This match has barely gotten started when it's interrupted by the Singh brothers, who are running down the ramp away from R-Truth, who's chasing them because at the moment Samir is the 24/7 champion. Rowan takes out both the Singh brothers. R-Truth wants none of Rowan and he runs away, and then Rowan squashes the dude, the jobber in the ring. So pretty quick stuff. It gets a C grade. You know what, that's a pretty decent grade considering this was basically just a squash match and a bit of 24/7 shenanigans. But it gets a C because I want to know what's in that bloody cage. I want to know what's inside of there. Is it a spider? Is it a rat? I want to know. Next up, Kevin Owens versus Drew McIntyre, and Samoa Joe on commentary immediately calls out the big glaring error with this match. Both guys are on Team Raw. Why are they fighting each other? In fact, Jerry Lawler's like, yeah, I agree 100%. They'll just weaken each other before the pay-per-view. Right, so why is this happening? If the commentators are calling that out, why is it happening? But I can't complain too much because Owens and McIntyre have one hell of a match. The best match on this week's Raw. It was just so entertaining to watch. Check this one out if you haven't seen it already. There's barricade spots and apron spots and rope breaks and finishers and near falls and back and forth counters, and it's just everything you want in a high octane TV match until the very closing moments. Owens hits a big climactic stunner. It looks like the end of the match. Drew sells it wonderfully, and Owens is crawling over to make the cover, and then bow down to the King plays, and here comes Triple H and some lads from the NXT roster. This gets an A- grade. It should have been an A grade. I really enjoyed this match, but it does get a little bit knocked off for that frustrating non-finish. But we'll see what Triple H has got to say for himself right now. Triple H grabs Owens a bottle of water from the ringside area. He's really laying it on thick. He's really trying to do what he did to Rollins recently when he tried to entice him over to the NXT side of things. But he does so in a really well-written and imaginative way. He says, you know what, I'll admit it, I've got a soft spot for Seth Rollins, always have. As you can see over the course of his career, I've been quite favourable to him. You're different, Kevin Owens. You're a different breed. You turned on your best friend in NXT to win the NXT title. You came out on your own accord onto the main roster and called out John Cena and sent him away in an ambulance while you stomped on his United States title. But he says when Owens was being built up as a great NXT champion, eventually, in the end, he was taken away. And by taken away, he means called up to Raw and SmackDown. But he says, I suspect you never actually wanted to go, and look at the way you've been treated. You were called up by people who didn't know what they had until they had you. And when they had you, they realized that you didn't fit the mold. You were fired by Kurt Angle, you were fired by Shane McMahon. Come back to where you belong, essentially, is what Triple H is saying. He says, don't worry about the NXT guys on the ramp. They're just here to ensure that me and you are allowed to have this conversation without anybody else getting involved. But he says, look, they came all the way here for you. Where are the Raw roster? Where are your team? They don't care about you. And then Owens does look really convinced, actually. You can see it in his face. And Triple H is just promoing his arse off. It's really, really impressive. But then he says, the reason that Raw aren't here is because they know they'd get their asses kicked by NXT. So that obviously brings out the Raw roster. There's a big old brawl. Kevin Owens has just stood in the ring with Triple H like, what's going on? What do I do? And it's all really good. But then Adam Cole and the Undisputed Era come in from the other side, from the crowd, and they beat up Kevin Owens. And to be fair, Triple H, it makes sense. He looks really confused. Like, why would he want this to happen when he's trying to recruit Kev to his team? The OC and AJ Styles come down and kind of even the odds, and it's all building a little bit to that Styles versus Roddy Strong, Undisputed Era, versus Nakamura match at Survivor Series. But mainly this was all about Triple H and Kevin Owens. It gets an A grade. I really liked it. As long as it wasn't just all a ruse to beat up Kevin Owens a little bit and the Undisputed Era were in on it with Triple H all along. I really love the idea of Triple H trying to bring Kevin Owens back, and I hope that Owens does end up back in NXT, and I hope this in fact builds to a feud between him and Adam Cole, because that would just be brilliant stuff. but it only gets an A grade if that's true. If this turns out that it was all just a plan and Triple H just wanted to get one over on Kev with the help of Adam Cole, then we'll have to knock some marks off retroactively. But for now, A grade, big highlight of the show for me. Next up, Paul Heyman's on the Tron and says that Brock Lesnar versus Rey Mysterio at Survivor Series will now be a no DQ match. Rey is interviewed backstage and accepts this stipulation and says that he'll hunt Brock Lesnar down and he'll make him pay. This gets a B grade. Heyman's obviously excellent. Rey's, a really good promo as well when he wants to be. But the reason it doesn't get a higher grade is because I don't actually agree with this stipulation. I was really looking forward to seeing Lesnar versus Rey in a singles match and just seeing how they put it together and what they would do. Now that it's a no DQ match, I'm not actually as excited. I feel like that's a little bit of a cop-out for me. Next up, Asuka versus Natalya with Kairi Sane at ringside. It doesn't last very long. Natalya fights off interference from Kairi Sane, but it just distracts her long enough for Asuka to hit the Asuka kick and pick up the victory. Is it called the Asuka kick? The big roundhouse kick she does to the side of the head. Quick roundhouse kick to the temple. Lovely stuff. This gets a B-. It was too short to be anything really special, but that final kick from Asuka was really, really good, and Natalya sold it really well. And finally, the main event, Randy Orton and mystery partner taking on the Viking Raiders. Bit of notes from throughout the show to get into a little bit just before we talk about this match, just to explain why this match is taking place. It was initially meant to be Hawkins and Ryder versus the Viking Raiders, but they were jumped backstage by the AOP. Later on, Orton stepped in via a backstage interview to prove that he is the master of teamwork, that he says he is. He's always been the best at Survivor Series. He can work as part of a team when he really needs to, despite being, at heart, a very selfish guy. So Orton says he'll choose a mystery opponent, and that brings us to the main event. And that mystery opponent is revealed to be Ricochet, who Orton had a bit of a curious interaction with last week, and I think they want to build on that heading into Survivor Series. This match is actually quite a fun one, with all four guys working really well with each other, and it's a pretty decent main event. That is until the SmackDown show's theme tune hits, and here comes the SmackDown locker room down the ramp in their little blue SmackDown merchandise with Fox written on it, and some of them wearing little blue caps as well, and it looks really unintentionally hilarious. So they all get in the ring and they beat down the Raw guys, and then the Raw guys fight back and actually knock them to the outside of the ring. There's way more than 4 SmackDown guys. There's only 4 Raw guys, and they're all tired from just having had this match against each other. So it's not looking good for SmackDown come Sunday, let me tell you. Now, of course, here comes NXT, and they start to dominate, and it's all kind of working really well for them, but it's sort of implied that it's just because they've got the numbers game. I think they look a bit weak when it comes to one-on-one parts of this big brawl, but as a whole, they're kind of swarming the other 2 rosters. But then burn it down! Here comes not just Seth Rollins, but the entire Raw locker room just coming out with Seth Rollins' theme tune for some reason. Because he's like the spiritual leader of Raw and he burns it down, man. And yeah, there's a big 3-way brawl, but still NXT look to have the upper hand. They even isolate AJ Styles in the ring, and they all take turns just kicking the crap out of him. Roddy Strong gets some hits in ahead of his match with him on Sunday. And then Triple H appears on the Tron and invites both Raw and SmackDown to send whoever they want to NXT on Wednesday night. He's leaving the doors wide open. And that was the end of the show. The match itself, the main event, was a good match for the amount of time it was allowed to go on for. And the big show closing angle was exciting in a kind of chaotic, wild way with lots of bodies involved. But I wasn't a huge fan of it, and I'm going to give it only a C+ grade. Let me explain why. Now, before I say this, I don't like the term geeks to be used when describing wrestlers. You know, you'll always hear like Brian Alvarez being like, and he looked like an absolute geek just because somebody lost a match or something. But Team SmackDown here looked like absolute geeks. The lads came out to, the SmackDown theme, to AC/DC, the SmackDown theme. It just sounded so generic, the SmackDown theme tune from the TV show. They came out to that wearing just bright blue Fox, caps and everything. They looked so bad as well, getting beaten up by effectively Randy Orton, Ricochet and the Viking Raiders when they had the numbers advantage. Then they got sandwiched in the middle by NXT coming down. I'm going to be really curious to see if SmackDown win a single match on Sunday. And after last year's Survivor Series, they really, really need to. And also, this may have just been me, let me know what you think, but to me, NXT did come off a tiny bit lucky. They only just won because they had the numbers advantage. 2 or 3 guys just ran single file straight at Randy Orton, and he was just like, RKO, bang, RKO, bang. And he was tired from a match. So I don't know if that portrayed NXT in the best light, but we'll see what happens on Wednesday. And now on to the overall grade. Well, this Raw had several matches with good action in, dotted throughout the show. The action was pretty strong and consistently strong throughout the night. And Triple H cut one hell of a promo as well in the middle of the show in that segment with Kevin Owens. But I think this was one of those Raws where it was actually less than the sum of its parts. I really do think that it came out looking a little bit weak when you look at it as a whole. So for that reason, I'm only going to give it a B-. I'm saying this because 3 matches, Rollins versus Andrade, Owens versus Drew, and the main event tag team match all had the same finish effectively, a DQ or a no contest, because of other brands interfering. And I know it's the build up to Survivor Series, but it really did prevent the show from building up any sort of rhythm or momentum. It was a hard show to watch, despite the wrestling largely being pretty good. So that's it. Let me know what you thought of Monday Night Raw, and thanks very much for watching. Adam Pacitti will be back before long. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.